Hello, and welcome to By Moonlight, where it's not a phase to go into mole mode after an authoritarian regime takes over your country.
Sometimes you just gotta mole.
You gotta go into mole mode. This week we're talking all things Rune and Rising by Leigh Bardugo.
Woohoo! We're finishing out the trilogy, baby!
It's funny that... So, I said mole mode, so this is funny. This is an inside joke between me and some friends from college, but back in the day, I don't really remember the context of the conversation. I think we were just talking about, like, burrowing under the city and, like, going underground during, like, a particularly fun weekend adventure, and I was like, let's go into mole mode, and that just kind of stuck.
I like it.
Whenever I'm going through it, I'm like, I'm going into mole mode. I'm going to go underground. I'm going to burrow for a little while, and y'all won't see me for a couple days. Mole mode.
Mole mode.
Adapt it.
I like it.
So who are you?
I'm Caitlin, and today I went to Barnes & Noble and I bought a book to add to my TBR pile that I will not be touching for the longest time.
What book did you buy?
I bought Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson.
Oh, Mary E. Pearson.
Finally gonna get into that
her.
Remnant Chronicle universe, baby.
Is that what that is? Is that the first book in that series? Oh, that's so perfect for today because we're talking about another series in the fantasy realm.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought I owe it to her to actually read those books, considering she was so nice to us.
She's a wonderful person. Shout out to
is.
Mary E. Pearson. You're a real one.
Yes.
And also shout out to Leigh Bardugo, who we recently met.
We did, yeah.
At an event in DC.
Mm-hmm.
She's so lovely and cool and interesting, and I want to be her.
I love her. She's great.
So
Big fan.
Big fan. Hello everyone. I'm Emberlyn, and I am in my scrambled egg era.
I'm excited for you.
I am too. I finally learned how to cook scrambled eggs so they're not disgusting and that you don't get sick of them. Because you ever have a phase when you're like, actually, you go through a phase where you're like, oh, scrambled eggs, yummy, yummy. And then you're like, actually, scrambled eggs are the bane of my existence and they're disgusting. And if I look at one, I'll vomit.
Yeah, I'm in the latter era, so...
Ooh, I found a way out of that. So I don't know where. Vishwas taught me this great scrambled egg recipe that has changed my life and the way I think about the world.
Do share.
So I'll be sharing. I'll drop it in the.
Okay.
I'll drop it in the. It's all about slow cooking your eggs, slow cooking your chicks. You know.
All right.
So, Caitlin, tell us a little bit about Rune and Rising. How does this book begin?
In the final book of Shadow and Bone, the Ravkan throne belongs to the Darkling once and for all. Sun Summoner Alina Starkov and her friends have retreated to the underground city of the Skeevy Apparat, a religious character that has sanctified Alina as her power has weakened. Despite this weakness, Alina's psychic connection to the Darkling remains intact.
This dude.
Fucking guy.
Oh, how I missed my favorite freak, the Apparat. This guy is so skeevy and odd. Like, I wish I'd asked when we met Leigh. There was a Q&A portion of the event. I wish we had asked her who her inspiration was for the Apparat, or like why she chose to include him in the grishaverse, because he is just an odd fellow, as we discussed previously on the show.
Every time he's on the page, he makes my skin crawl. Which I think we said in our first review of Shadow and Bone, but. Well, every time he speaks, and like, if you listen to the audiobook, the way the narrator talks for him, it just makes you go, ugh.
Yeah,
like, stop it.
He just provokes something in me. I can't even describe the fear he makes me feel. I'm just unwell when I think about him.
Yup.
So, what happens after that?
So, Alina and her friends, including her child best friend and lover, Mal, must work to escape the Apparat. Gross. Return to the surface, find their allies, and find Mortzova's final amplifier, the Firebird. In other words, they've got a lot going on.
So another question I might have had for Leigh is if anxiety medication exists in the Grishaverse. Because if so, I think someone might consider prescribing it to Miss Starkov.
Yeah.
I just feel like, I think we talked about this before for maybe Siege and Storm, but like, how do you not have a panic attack when all of this is at stake? Like, that's so much that's going on in her life.
I think I would have a panic attack just finding out that I have Grisha powers that have been dormant my entire life. I'd be like, what is going on?
I have a panic attack when I leave my house. Like, I could never. It couldn't be me. could not be me.
I get a panic attack every time my computer tells me I have no storage, which happens often. So
I have a panic attack when I open my eyes in the morning.
Yeah. Just a constant state of worry.
No! Yeah.
Not again! To add to their plates, along the way, Alina faces many challenges and losses. Her trainer, Baghra, is killed by her own son, the Darkling. Her closest ally, Nikolai, is turned into a creature by the Darkling's power. The orphanage that she grew up in is overtaken by the Darkling and his soldiers. And worst of all, when Alina finds the final amplifier, she's heartbroken to realize that it is not in fact the Firebird, but it is her own heart and soul Mal.
Ow.
Woof.
This
Alina
is bringing
Starkov
back,
in the
a
no
lot of
good, very
trauma.
bad day.
Yeah, I know. It's like nothing's going right for her.
She can't catch a break.
I feel like I'm like, there's a lot of trauma that's like rising to the surface for me. Just like thinking
Is it
about all of
ruining
this
you
again.
as well?
No.
Is it ruining you so the trauma is rising? Maybe that's why it's called this.
That could be. Or it could be because of what happens in the final couple of scenes of the book when someone is ruined and the other is rising. That's like really bad lead, and I actually don't even know who I'm talking about. But during the final match with the Darkling, Mal forces Alina to kill him and release his power as the amplifier. Her power is lost and redistributed to the non-magical Ravkan soldiers, whilst Alina uses a Grisha dagger to kill the Darkling and destroy the fold of shadows that divides Ravka once and for all. Meanwhile, Nikolai is returned to his human form, and Alina's Grisha bring Mal back to life. The boy
All
who
is
lived.
well. All is well. And as we conclude a truly happy ending, the Lantsov throne is restored with some new additions to the court. Alina's enemy-turned-friend, big enemies to friends to lovers situation?
Yeah.
Just saying, there could have been an opportunity for that, Lee.
I agree with this.
Yeah. Yeah. Hashtag Zoya-Alina, am I right, guys?
Yeah! Anyway.
So Zoya is in the court, and Alina's friend turned enemy turned friend again. And Genya. Also, may I argue, Genya-Alina?
Come on.
I'm just
I
saying.
kept thinking, when we have this conversation later, I'll dig into this more, but I'm glad you said this.
Genya is also on the court, and the Sun Summoner symbol is... Ooh, say that 5 times fast. Sun Summoner symbol.
Yeah.
So,
I really gave you like a tongue twister when I wrote the
you
description.
really did. The Sun Summoner symbol is sunsetted. Setted. with a fake death and funeral. Mal and Alina return to their hometown and restore the orphanage where they live happily ever after. All right, Amberlynn, tell me what you thought of the world building of Ruin and Rising.
So, I love how far we've come from Shadow and Bone.
Mm-hmm.
This is personally my favorite book of this trilogy,
Nice.
if not one of my favorite Leigh Bardugo books overall.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just brings so much to the table, including a very refined and improved writing style on Leigh Bardugo's behalf. It's from this book onward that I feel like I really see her creativity and talent as a writer take flight.
Yeah, completely agree.
Because we've got 2 great duologies after this, and then her 9th House series. And there is so much in this book that I feel like she does right that ties up a lot of the loose ends in the first 2 books and sets us up very nicely for those 2 duologies to follow, both of which are incredible. I felt very tied to the world building in this book because of the first 2, yes, but also because of what she leaves us with. So, like, the underground city concept is very cool. The expansion of Nikolai's character arc is very cool.
Yeah.
The twist at the end is very cool.
Mm-hmm.
This book just does so much right in my mind, and I consider it to be a very strong finish to the series.
Yeah, 100% agree.
What did you think?
For me, it was... I was never really a big fantasy person growing up. Like, I never read any of the... like big fantasy series. Like I didn't read Harry Potter for like the longest time. I just didn't care. Never read Game of Thrones, never read Lord of the Rings. And half of that was because the idea of having to learn history and lore of a world that didn't exist I was so unappealing to me. Like, I'm like, well, it's not real. Why do I have to have a history lesson?
I got enough going I'm 9.
I have no money and I am very small. I never cared for it. Like, I always, like, to me, I never even gave it a chance, which isn't fair, but like younger me was always just like, I don't want to learn it. I don't even like my own history. So I don't even want to learn our history. Why do I need to learn one of a fake world, you know? And it just like, I was always more like interested in the story of the characters than I was the actual lore. So when I had to learn all of these rules in order to enjoy the characters, like, I was just like, that's too much work for me. Like, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
You know? But now I've turned around. I like the lore. I like learning stuff. So that was honestly, like, when I was first reading this book was a huge factor of it to me, that I was actually enjoying learning all about, like, Morozova and how he created the amplifiers and his family and, you know, everything that happens with, like, the whole Firebird situation. Like, I thought that was so interesting. And, like, I think what Leigh Bardugo does well is she takes, like, all, like, it never felt like, none of the twists felt forced, where it's like even like in Shadow and Bone, when you find out that Baghra is the Darkling's mom, I remember being like, what? Like, it never felt like like, oh my god, no way. It never felt like, oh, I saw that coming, you know. So I just really liked that every piece of information that you learn, it's never obvious, but it also builds upon each other, and it all comes together in a really satisfying way. And I also, like, really liked learning more about each country, and, like, that gets expanded more in some of the later books, but, like, this world is so vivid to me. Again, her imagery kind of hooks me in general as it is, because I feel like if you plopped me in the world of the Grishaverse, I could navigate it totally fine. Like, I know where Fjerda is, I know where Kerch is, Naviazem, Ravka, like, I know it inside and out. And maybe it's because I was living there mentally for a while when I was first reading the books. But I just feel like she creates such a vivid world with so much depth, and it makes it all feel the more real. But it's not like it's not like someone's giving me, like, a fun fact sheet of, like, oh yeah, and what about, like, here's fun things about this country. It's like, cool, I don't need to know that. It's, no, I do need to know that, and it ties into the story that I need to know. I don't know. I just think it's all really well done, and she got me interested in lore of fantasy. So
yeah, I think she did the same for me, because I'm not a big fantasy person, and I just feel very sentimental about these books. Like, they're some of the first books I started reading again when I got back into reading. Same. And even though I'm not, like, a big fantasy person, I find myself just, like, really enjoying these and loving them. Yeah. Like, and wanting to read more fantasy because of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this was a great series to use to get back into reading, because that's what hooked me into reading. That's why we have the podcast. Like, genuinely, like, these books are why we're here today. And I just think it says a lot about how well they're written and how lovely they are, that you can then expand into other series and be like, oh, well, I love Shadow and Bone. This seems similar to it. I'll read that. And I just think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's great too. Yeah. I have big feelings about these books. So, was there a specific moment in this book that really hooked you, Caitlin?
Oh, you already know it's Nikolai. Listen.
Yes.
I love him with my whole entire heart. I don't think I've ever, like, I know he's the fan favorite, but I feel like it's, like, one of the first times I've read a book where I'm like, I know everybody loves him, and I completely subscribe to it. Like, not like the, well, I like someone different because I'm quirky like that, or, like, I'm going against the grain. But, like, usually I feel like when I hear, like, oh, this character is a fan favorite, I feel like it can be almost like, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but like it's like almost like too predictable, or like, oh, like of course, like he's written to be like, oh, he says all the funny lines, so like you kind of expect it to be like him to say like all the snarky comments or whatever, and it's just like, oh, ha, okay, we get it, this is your role as your character. But genuinely, I think he's hilarious. I think he's a great character. I think he has so much depth to him that you start to scratch the surface of in like this book, but then you do get more of that later down the line. And I feel like having those other books that he does show up in makes me love him even more. So rereading this time, I'm just like, oh, he doesn't even know the journey he's gonna go on, you know?
Yes.
So his entrance into the story was so great, and it was so him and so iconic. Like, it made me audibly go yes when I was reading the book, because I was waiting for him to show up, because you're not sure, like, did he escape the attack at the Little Palace in the last book? Like, Alina doesn't even know if he's safe, but there are rumors that he's been doing something, but like, are they believable? Like, is he okay? When he does re-enter the story, Alina and Mal are basically held, I think they're held at gunpoint by these other soldiers, and you hear this voice be like, oh yeah, well, I heard like Lantsov has a whole army, and they started like talking kind of back and forth, but you don't know exactly who is talking. Alina just says another soldier in the back, and then so I just love the way that like Nikolai starts off as like a random voice in the background, like, so you're not sure what's going on yet, but then he kind of like starts to talk about how great Nikolai is, and the line is brave in battle, sharp as a whip, an excellent dancer, oh, and an even better shot. And then the guy who had Alina and Mal at gunpoint was shot through the head, basically, like shot between the eyes. And you're like, oh shit, like, oh my god, it's him. And it just made everything better by Alina going, impossible, and Mal going, don't even, like, don't say it. Because it you know who it is, and you don't even need to be told. Like, it's just so exciting, because then, like, he's brought back into the game, and he's just as iconic as ever, and I just adore him.
He was my hook too. I agree with you. He's just so cheeky and charming, and he just brings like such a great energy to this book that I feel like was missing before he showed up. I feel like he really revitalizes the story in a way that's so lovely and enjoyable, and especially if you read the next duology that Nikolai is featured in, you'll come back to these moments and be like, oh my god, like, this is where it all started, and this is where it's going. It's really, really awesome to read about. Also, when we get Baghra's stare down with her son, with the Darkling, it just like really breaks me to like think about. I literally did not know how much I would care about her until
isn't that crazy?
She was gone, and then I was like, oh, she's gone.
Wait, I liked her. Bring her back.
So same here. And then from there, the book really takes off. It moves very fast until like the very, very end, I feel like. And the pacing of it is like really, I feel like, really exciting. Like, you really stay connected to everything that's going on.
Right. I think Lee does a really good job at like knowing when to bring certain people in. Like for Nikolai, he wasn't introduced too quick. But I think it was like chapter 6 or chapter 7 that he came back. It's like just enough in the beginning for you to be like, you're already interested in the story, but then bam, like your favorite character is here, and then it just snowballs from there. It's great.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, 100 times yes.
So, did you have a favorite quote from Moon and Rising?
Yes, from the very end, when it's talking about Mal and Alina, they had an ordinary life full of ordinary things, if love can ever be called that. Which I just love, because that's what it is. Like, at the end of the day, it's your cat curled up in a ball at the end of your bed, and like a 9-to-5 job that concludes with takeout with the person you love, and like a nice hot bath. It's just like ordinary and simple, and there's no murder and death. So I like the simplicity of that line. I like I'm a big slice of life story girl, so I liked that line a lot. How about you?
There was a lot of good ones, but one that stuck out to me a lot is from David when it's after Jenya's whole like trial with the king, and you know she's very upset, and David looks at her and says, beauty was your armor, fragile stuff I'll show, but what's inside you, that's steel. It's brave and unbreakable, and it doesn't need fixing. And I love that so much because at this point, like David loves to fix things. Like, he loves to invent new things, and Genya just felt like in that moment, like, oh, I'm just like another thing for you to fix. And he's like, no, like, you're good. I just love you for who you are. And Genya and David are, they're so special to me because I love it when they're characters that, like, you never think, like, either of them would ever look at the other. Like, even Alina in the first book, when she can tell that Genya has, like, a thing for the durast with the messy hair. It's just like, of all people, like, that's who she goes for. And then he's not the best, like, he's not the best at articulating his feelings or understanding exactly what's going around him, but what he does know is that he loves this woman with his entire heart. And, like, I just think that's so special, and they're so special to me going forward. And I loved seeing their relationship really, like, start up in this book again, and, like, revisiting that. It just made my little heart happy because I just want nothing but the best for them. And David, to me, is just so sweet. And so when it's not often that he says a lot of profound things, but when he does, they're usually about Genya, and I think that's really sweet.
True. I feel like I really didn't connect with David until they casted him, and I was like, for the Netflix show, and I was like, oh, hello, sir.
He's like, I love it because he's so... He very much has, like, that, like, little kind of, like, nerdy aspect that David has, but he's also beautiful. So, like...
I'm like, girl, it's supposed to be a nerd? Okay.
I was just like, okay, get in line. But it was also, like, when he showed up, you immediately knew who it was. You're like, oh my god, it's David.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Caitlin, what song would you listen to in your final battle with the Darkling?
To keep up my streak of being a Florence and the Machine stan first, and person second.
Yes. As you should.
I said Various Storms and Saints for obvious reasons. But also because that song has such a good build-up, and it to me, it's almost like haunting in a way, too. And I, like... still genuinely get chills when I hear that song once the chorus finally hits. So I just feel like if I ever saw, like, a battle, like, on screen set to that song, like, maybe a little bit in slow motion too. And I think it's cool when, like, big battle scenes are put to songs that, like, you wouldn't necessarily pick. Like, they're not, like, huge and orchestral and, like, you know, like, we're fighting a war. It's, here's a sad, slow song, and people are fighting to it. Like, I feel like that evokes more emotion to me sometimes. I mean, it needs to, when it's used well. So I just think that if there's ever to be, like, a war scene set to that song, it would have to. I think that'd be really cool.
Yes.
Yeah. What about you?
Ooh. Okay. Somebody take notes. Also, Florence just released. I haven't seen the Yellow Jackets yet. I don't even know if it's out yet. But she released a cover of No Doubt's, what is it,
I'm Just a Girl. Yeah, it's so good.
I'm Just a Girl. Oh my god.
I was like...
This woman just...
I don't watch Yellow Jackets, but, like, I'm thinking about it.
I sure will now.
Just for that one Florence song that you're using for promo.
Just for that one Florence song? Yeah, also the album cover just made me think, like, ooh, that looks good.
I know.
Yeah. When I was doing my notes last night, I was listening to My Tears Are Becoming a Sea by M83. Which has this great build up and climax. It's got, like, a couple lyrics, but it's mostly just instrumental work.
Yeah.
And I just think it works so well, especially with Mal's death and everything else that happens. Yeah. Another one that I was listening to is This Is a Life by Sunlux. And I feel like Sunlux is, like, a great example of, like a group that you could just kind of use their songs over and over again.
Agree.
But the lyrics are so fitting for Mal and Alina's end. It's also a male-female duet between, of all people, Mitski and David Byrne. Hello? So it just works. It's actually originally featured in Everything Everywhere All at Once, where it works the best. But,
I still need to see it.
I digress. I still think it'd be cool to see it, something like this.
Nice.
And it's what I thought about when I heard the song first.
So what character from this book would you worship like a saint?
Nikolai. I feel like we've touched on this already. he just
does
he's
it.
everything to me.
Yeah.
I'm in love with him. I want him to marry me. I will be forwarding him my home address.
As you should. As you should.
Same for you?
100% the same for me. I mean, there's a lot of good characters in this book, obviously. Like, I love Genya with my whole heart. I love Alina. I think she's a great protagonist, but I just feel like Nikolai is such an interesting character, and I feel like it's almost unfair of me to say he's my favorite character in this book because I liked his duology so much, and like I've just because you get so much more insight there, but like revisiting this book and the Shadow and Bone trilogy, it just made me like appreciate him more, and like you kind of almost like see the layers that he has going on, and it's just I think he's so interesting where like he never really falters, or he's always like he's always got a snarky remark or something smart to say. He's always like ready. When he finally like doesn't have that advantage, and like Alina even mentions like, oh, it was the first time I've seen him falter, I'm like, that's when you know there's something more going underneath, and this has all been like a mask of sorts. And that to me is always so interesting in characters, when like on the surface they're one way, but like you slowly learn deep down like that's not the full truth. Like there's
it's not the whole truth.
A lot more to unpack there. So I just think he's a really cool character, and I think it was a bold move of what happened to him in this story, which we will talk about in a minute. But
is there a character you would stick the nativia in?
The Darkling. I mean, I know it's the obvious choice, but I just don't like the guy. I'm not a
he's obnoxious.
Not a big fan. I know he's wearing all black, but the man is a walking red flag. Like he is.
Now Ben Barnes. Come to my house. Yeah.
It's
right.
It's so funny because like like reading the books, it's like literally leave. Like I don't understand what your what's your obsession, especially like for me reading Shadow and Bone. Like starting off I was like, oh my god, am I gonna ship them? And the second you find out like who he is and what he's doing to Alina, I'm like, never mind. Like I'm out. I'm super good. But I do think it's interesting in the series. I look at him and I'm like, let's hear him out. You know? let him cook, you know, like let's just see what's going on. But truly though, he's a manipulator. He's not good. He like what really gets me in this book is when he attacks Karamzin and he kills Anakuya, and he looks at Alina and it's like, I believe she was the closest thing you had to a mother, correct? Like, dick. Like, rude. And then you expect her to just, like, be with you? I don't know. Like, the entire time I'm like, she's just not that interested in you. Get over it.
She's just not that into you,
Yeah. So every little thing that he did, I was just like, you're just digging your own grave. Like, how could she want to be with you anyway? And you're not helping yourself. You're not redeeming yourself in any way. You're making this worse for you. And just everything you do makes me hate you more. So, great villain.
And it's obvious.
Don't like him.
And it's obvious he doesn't care if she wants to be with him or not. Like, I think he's past the point of wanting it to be her choice.
Right.
And, like, that's what makes him all the more volatile in this book. Like, I remember that scene where he kills Alina's, like, where he kills people at the orphanage. Like, it hurt me.
Like,
badly.
If there's any other chance of redemption, I'm like, you lost it. You lost it. And I feel like for him, he's just like, oh, Alina, you'll eventually see. Like, we're going to live a long life together. Like, you'll get over it eventually. Yeah. You'll forget.
I think I have to second your hatred of the Darkling. I feel like he is just a lot. Like, I mean, I think it's so funny because it's like, that's the point. Yeah. But also it's like, oh, he really does suck. Yeah. And then another thing is, like, the Apra in this book just, like, drove me nuts, like, at the very beginning. Because he's just, like, such a tedious barrier to everything that Alina needs to go through in order to find the Firebird. And he's just like, oh my god, he's just, every time he'd show up I'd be like, this guy again.
This guy, I just want to go, like, shake him. You know,
like, get out of my, go leave. You know,
especially since, like, he's just like another person who's using Alina for his benefit, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like all these dudes got together and were like, how can we use this lady to our benefit? And a National Women's Week.
I know.
For that matter.
How dare you?
Hello?
All right, so moving on to our 2 peaks in the valley for this book. What was your first peak?
So I would say that the twist in this book really razzles my dazzles.
Yes.
I think so this is something you talk about in your notes as well, that it is completely unexpected and yet consistently hinted at throughout the series that Mal is the third amplifier. And you just never notice. I feel like I'd like to meet someone who was like, oh yeah, I noticed all along. And I'd be like,
no, you didn't.
Yeah? No, you didn't. You're wrong. Because it's one of those, I feel like it's one of the best concealed twists. Like, maybe there's something up. Maybe you can speculate that there's something magical about Mal because of his tracking abilities. But I don't think there was ever a point when I was like, this guy's the amplifier. Yeah. You're so, because one exists and you're so, like, focused on the Firebird that's what you'd expect to be what comes next. Yeah. And I remember reading this part and just breaking into tears. And I can't remember exactly where things went from there, but I either A, had to pause because I was so broken over this, or B, I kept reading because I had to know how they resolved this. And I think it was probably the latter, but it's just such an emotional part of the book and so unexpected that I feel like it causes you to just like go, oh my God, I start crying. Yeah. At least that's what happened to me.
Yeah, I started crying. So that was one of my peaks as well, is the twist.
Right.
And I think what I really like about it is that so when I first read Shadow and Bone, one of my first thoughts was that, oh, maybe he might have a power too, because she does use her power the first time as she's holding onto his hand, like as she's trying to save him. So like I thought about that as like, oh, maybe they have some sort of connection. But then didn't think too much on it later, because then nothing else was never mentioned again. And a lot of it, why I think it works is because it's all coincidence. And there's so many things, and it's not even like, oh yeah, we'll just throw that in there to cover up our tracks, you know, like it's like, he, like everything else could have been explained. Like they found, like Alina mentions in this book, like, oh, we found the stag right after we first kissed, and like I thought, like when I felt this power, I thought it was just because the stag was nearby, like not because he was touching me, and like everything could be explained. It's like when you're trying to figure out if ghosts are real, like, like was it a ghost or was there just a slight breeze in the house? Like, I don't know. Yeah. So I just felt like it was so well done, and because like yeah, he's a good tracker. And like kind of insanely good, to where it's like, oh, maybe he has some sort of power in that, because it's like kind of wild how good of a tracker he is, but never that he was the third amplifier and that was why. No. Like I never even crossed my mind, especially since you find out that the Firebird exists. So like the stag exists, the sea whip exists, they see the Firebird, and the Firebird is just like chilling, you know, like he's just trying to eat some food. The Firebird. And
just trying to munch and crunch.
Yeah,
don't mind me.
And meanwhile, like, you know, Alina or Mal like saves Alina and grabs her wrist, and that's when they feel it. I thought that was so well done, and just like the dread that comes afterwards, where like, because this entire book, you're like, you gotta kill the Firebird so you have the amplifier so that we can defeat the Darkling. But now the amplifier is her best friend and the person that she loves. But we still have to defeat the Darkling. So, like, there's no way out of it. Sometimes you're just going to kill your best friend for the sake of the greater good.
Sometimes you gotta, you know.
I mean, that's our plans for this weekend, so.
Yes, thank you, finally. Good enough.
Yay.
I'm done. I'm throwing in the towel. Thank you.
What was your second peak?
The love scene in this book. I think it's one of my favorites ever in like a fantasy novel or just any book, especially like a young adult book, because I've been reading a lot of fantasy books lately, including some very, very sex positive ones. Yeah,
toe curling, if you will.
Yeah, I'm currently in what a coworker of mine recently called the SJM Encyclopedia of Fantasy. And there's some pretty dirty, smutty stuff going on over there, and that's all
Who would have
fine
known?
and good, but it does get to the point where sometimes I feel like that dirty, smutty stuff is overtaking the whole narrative.
Yeah. Your breasts are tightening
and
too
I'm like
much.
the breasts did tighten quite a lot in this series.
Oh, no.
And I'm like a super emotional, like passionate like person, and I feel like I need to have a lot of sentiment and meaning and when I read scenes that are intimate. And I really love that this scene delivered, because it's very subtle and gentle, and there's like kindness and softness and this sense that these two people who love each other very much may never see each other again after this night.
Yeah.
And I cried. Like, I think in that moment, I was thinking about my own partner and like, what would it be like if we never saw each other again? And I really felt like having that perspective, like really made me feel emotional reading this.
Yeah. I think another great reason why I like that scene is like, it's detailed in a way where you know what's going on, but you don't need the step-by-step process. You know what I mean? Like, I thought it was
I do.
I thought it was a very like
sure do
delicately written, but not in a way where it's just like, and then we did the do, if you know what I mean. Like
oh yeah, not like it's like not so subtle that it's like, oh oh, panning over to the curtains.
Yeah. The curtains blowing in the wind. Or like
curtains blowing in the wind.
But it was beautiful. And it was lovely, and it made me tear up, and I just felt like it was just so well done. And at this point, like, you're like, of course they're doing this because he's gonna die, and this is the last night they probably have together. And and it is all out of love, and that's like beautiful and wonderful. And I just thought it was the best sex scene I've ever read. I'll say it.
What was your next peak?
My next peak, as horrible as it was, when Nikolai gets attacked by the Darkling's powers and he becomes one of those monsters, I thought that was such a brilliant scene. A lot of it because of how it made me like, it gave me a visceral reaction to what was happening on the page. And it was because, like, at the point that I was reading it, it had been a while since I've been able to, like, read consistently and really get into a book. It was so nice to have, like, to be reading something that made me, like, go, no! Oh my God!
Yeah.
Like, because it doesn't happen super often. And I read this right before work. And I just remember...
Oh, yeah?
I
forgot about that.
Yeah. I was at another friend's house, and it was right before work, and I was like, I'm going to read my book with my coffee before I have to leave, and it's going to be a great morning. And then that's what I read, was my favorite character, who at the time I thought dying. And I was like, no, they killed Nikolai. We're halfway through the book. Oh my God, I'm crying. A friend comes home because she works a night shift, and she's like, are you good? I'm like, they just killed my favorite character. I don't know what to do.
No.
And now I have to go work a 12-hour shift. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And it, like, I thought about it all day. I was like, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that happened. And I was like, I didn't even want to read the book at work because I was like, no, because probably more bad stuff is going to happen, and how am I supposed to explain that to your coworkers?
Yeah, you'd be emotional.
Right. It was just nice to get that reaction. And I love it when any sort of media can do that.
Nice to feel something.
It is. Like, I read to feel things.
So fair.
Yeah, and I love it when, like, a show or a movie or a book can, like, bring that out of me. I mean, it happens a lot. I'm known to cry at everything. I'm a Pisces. And it's also just who I am. I just get really emotionally attached to everything. But I feel like reading, it's almost harder for that to happen because I am more of a visual person. So unless it's like a really good book and I can really like get it all in my head and like feel really attached to the characters, that's when it can happen. And this, like, Lee Bardugo does it to me all the time. And this was no different. And then I just think it was a really bold move to take out one of your biggest, most popular characters like that. And like now at the end, he does he lives, of course, and he but there's some side effects, and that to me is what's really interesting, and to see that it's not all gone, and to have that be established at the end of Ruin and Rising. And I believe it is at the end of this book, they call him the King of Scars, and I was like, ooh, that rings. Like, that's a good one.
That'd be a good title for a book.
It really would be. I hope she takes us up on that advice. Yes. But I just thought it was really cool, and I'm glad that, and I do think it was cool that he kept showing up. Like, you could tell that he was still him, despite being that monster, and the way he like was following them, and then Alina tries to save him at one point, and so it wasn't like immediate dread that, I mean, it was at first for me when I read it, because I was like, oh my god, he's dead, and then and gone forever, but then like he keeps popping back up, and Alina is like, I know it's him, and I know he's fighting it, and like so there was that constant hope throughout it that like maybe he'll be okay, but still at the same time the dread, because nothing seems to be working, and he's not there anymore to like give those fun quippy lines or be like the hope that he kind of has been at this point, because he was always like, there's a point after that battle where they're escaping, and they're like, Adric's lost his arm, they're all tired, they've lost a couple people, they've just watched this other guy who betrayed them get ripped apart, and they're all tired, but they have to get away, and like everyone is miserable. And
it's been a rough couple of days.
Yeah, again, if they could have like Grisha anxiety medication, they all need it. They all need something. They all need sleep, they need a break. And I just know that if Nikolai was there, the energy in the room would be different. But they lost the person who was usually the most optimistic and the one to make you laugh. And it's just heartbreaking, and I loved it.
Ouchie.
I thought it was a great scene.
I think Lee is so good at fairy tale. Like, she takes someone who's a prince and turns him into a beast, and it's like, it has no resemblance to like Beauty and the Beast, the classic fairy tale, but at the same time it's its own thing that's it's unique and like interesting, and you want to keep reading because of just, I feel like the whimsy of it all. You know? So I'm with you there. My first Valley, it's funny. It's so funny. It's really funny because I just like spent so much time giving praise to these moments in the book that I think are centered around Mal. But I think that Mal will always kind of be the weak point of these books for me, simply because his character is like, from my perspective, very inconsistently written. Like, he's so much more tolerable in the final book, and there are things that he says that make me very emotional, and where I'm just like, oh, poor baby, you know. But I don't fully understand how we got from point A, where he barely notices her, to point B, where he's like a raging dick to her, to point C, where he's so much more accommodating. I feel like there's some linearity there, but we don't fully see the establishing actions that create that dynamic. Right. So I found myself being confused from time to time, because I felt like I wasn't really seeing their relationship developing. I was just seeing him change, but I wasn't seeing him learn. I was just seeing him change. Yeah.
Almost for the sake of the plot.
There. Yeah, exactly. I also get this sense that he never like fully accepts who she is when she is the Sun Summoner, even though he sees her, even though he acknowledges her. For most of this trilogy, I get the sense that Alina, someone who already really struggles with her self-esteem and confidence, is always making herself smaller for this guy, and that drives me bingo boingo wacko. Like, I just can't ever be Team Mal. I think I'll always be like Team Alina girl boss because of that. And it's funny because you were like, oh, team, like, why did they pair her with like Zoya or
Genya
with Genya? And it's funny because like, I thought that part of me was like, oh, well, maybe she's like straight, I don't want to like push her with them, but like,
but also it's fun.
Yes, I fucking do. So like, because I feel like, and I mean, like, this is just what we could have had. Anyway, I still loved the ending, and I still walked away from the book like, cool. And I'll be looking forward to all of the young writers who take inspiration from this book to write amazing queer fantasy love stories. So I'm happy in that sense. Yeah. How about you?
Kind of along those same lines. I think that sometimes love triangles don't need to be included in your fantasy books. And I mean, we all know from our Shadow and Bone review, and I think I touched on it in Siege and Storm, I ship Melina. Like, big fan. But also, the boy has flaws, you know? And I think, like, reading it a second time through, I was very much like, no, I mean, does she need to be with someone? Like, I feel like every man in this woman's life is like, you should be with me because it would be a good idea for beneficial for me, beneficial for the country, beneficial for Grisha, beneficial for life, you know. Like, it was never like, I mean, there was a point, I think, in this book, if I remember correctly, where she's like, well, what about what I want? And I was like, girl, exactly, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do?
What do you want?
I think there was always that idea that she felt like, well, I don't want to upset this person, or like, I feel like I should be with this person because of XYZ. Like, I personally never shipped her with Nikolai because that felt too like transactional. I don't know if that's like the right word, but like, he was,
no, I think that's the right word.
He wanted her for the good of Ravka. Like, in this book, he gives her the Lantsov ring, and it's like, I'll make you my queen, and it'll be great to have a Grisha on the throne, and it'll be really good for our country, and if, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, what? No. Like, but like, why should that become her life if it's not what she wants? Like, no offense, but screw the country at that point. Like, that's not fair. Yeah. Her life gets taken away because she has some duty to fulfill. Like, no. And I never liked that, and I never shipped her with Nikolai because of those reasons of like I love him to death, but I just felt like he never had her best intentions in his heart. It was always for the greater good, I guess.
Yeah. Right.
And obviously I don't want her with a Darkling for obvious reasons. And
he's hot.
Ben Barnes hot, but Darkling bad, you know. Yeah. And even Mal, I was like, he'll be fine. You do you, girly. Like, I love friends to lovers. It's one of my favorite tropes ever. And I despite wearing those friends to lovers goggles so tightly around my face, I still was like, she'd be okay on her own, you know. But also at the same time, like, I am very glad with how it ended for them, and it made my little heart happy, because as long as she's happy, and that's kind of all that matters. So also, that tattoo was so dumb.
What tattoo? I don't remember.
I am become a blade.
Oh my god, don't even talk. I forgot about that.
I was listening to the audiobook this week, and it got to that, and I was like, wait, isn't this the part with the tattoo? And like, it says, I am become a blade. And I was like, this is so stupid. Like,
that is such a boys will be boys example. Not like boys will be boys, like the excuse that people use to excuse men's wrongs, but like boys will be boys, like, guy does something silly, like, type of situation.
He's like, I needed the reminder that at least I can be a weapon in your hand if I can't be with you or whatever. And I'm just like, get over yourself.
Too much.
So I'm honestly interested to see like how they might incorporate that into the show, because I will say, I think show Mal is so much better. They're doing right by him. I think they make him
softer. Yeah, they make him much softer.
Because I feel like even Leigh Bardugo has said, like, there are things she would have done differently now. And I think like now that they have the show, and because the show isn't like a direct adaptation of the books, because they're adding so much other stuff in, it's a really good opportunity to give Mal a better story and a better, honestly, even better written story at some points, and doing things that can expand his character. Like, I I loved him. So like I had show Mal in my head when I was reading this book again because it was just the most fresh.
Right.
And so when Mal
It's
would do
easier.
stuff, I'm like, he would not do that. Even though this is
in
the canon that he's
It's
saying.
funny because in the book he gives like big Cole Sprouse energy, but then in the show he's like lovely. He's like it's like a lot softer. Like I think the casting again made like a huge difference for me because I could like actually personify him in a way that's like comforting and nice. So wow.
Another random thing that happened was in the book, it's like, and then his blue eyes were sparkling or whatever it said, and I was like, he does not have blue eyes. Because I'm just thinking of Archie Renault in my head.
No, he doesn't.
I was like, Lee, you got it wrong. Your own book.
Lee now?
Lee,
He doesn't have blue eyes now.
no.
Incorrect. When the show becomes the canon.
Yeah. It's just because it's just more fresh in my head.
It
right
is.
now.
It is. It makes more sense.
Yeah.
It's our Fix-It Vic.
As long as they don't screw other things up.
Caitlin, on a scale of 1 to 5 times, you said to yourself, I am Blade.
I am become a blade.
What is it?
I am become a blade.
I am become a blade.
Yeah.
Edgy. How do you rate Ruin and Rising?
I give Ruin and Rising a solid 4 out of 5. I agree with you. I think this is my favorite in the trilogy. Like a lot happens, but it just kind of like it makes me fall in love with the world all over again, despite this being the third book in. And it's just like I love learning more about it. I feel like Lee's writing gets stronger and stronger with every book that she writes, and I think you see that with the next book that came out after this. Like I think from here she just like it's like she knows what she wants and she knows how to tell the story now. And you can just I like it when you can see it's like with like a singer, like you can hear their growth. Like I listen to Florence and the Machine's Lungs. It's wonderful, but then I listen to Dance Fever and then you can hear how much her voice has matured. That's how I felt like with Lee. Like you can hear how much her voice matures within her writing, and like she just gets more comfortable with like her story building and how she's treating these characters and how she's writing them. And I enjoy this book so much, but I cannot give it a 5 out of 5 because my 5 out of 5 is coming and I'm excited to talk about it.
True.
Yeah.
Factual.
Yeah.
No, you're right. It is coming. Kind of the same here.
Yeah.
Like things go crazy after this, as you will learn in our upcoming review of Six of Crows.
I'm so excited.
Wow. Because that's like her magnum opus, and I think we're both really excited to talk about it and like scream about it. So I'm going to be reserving my 5s for that moment, but I do really like this book. I think it's a really good conclusion to the trilogy. Yeah. Thank you for listening to Lit by Moonlight. Coming up, we're going to be, as we just mentioned, reviewing Six of Crows, and we're also going to be reviewing the second season of Shadow of Bone. Yay! Shadow and Bone. Yay! When it releases
on the 16th
later on.
So stay tuned for that. We hope you've enjoyed our recap of the trilogy. If you haven't already, we did review Shadow and Bone and Siege and Storm, so listen to them.
You should go listen to them.
Please do. And then stay tuned for Six of Crows and etc. We also, if you like shows, we also reviewed Our Flag Means Death recently. That's been great. We did What We Do in the Shadows. Yeah. So please, we have a lot of content. And so much more to come. So we hope you join us and stick around. Bye.